Welcome back to Real Talk with Susan Stone and Kristina Supler. We are full-time moms and attorneys bringing our student defense legal practice to life with real, candid conversations.
Kristina, what's so sad is we never get to meet people under everything's great.
Ordinary circumstances.
Yeah. Like, hey, come see you. If you call us for help, that means
Most of our clients are in a bad place. So when we're dealing with students, it's some type of crisis.
and we don't see the post-crisis. We don't get to see the bounce back.
Rarely. I mean, sometimes we stay in touch with families and receive updates. But yeah, I think you said it exactly right. We see the worst and we don't get to see the best or the recovery.
But the one aspect of getting through a legal process, at least, or a challenging situation, I think, is how resilient a student is when they come to us, because the students that have a little bit more grit. Yeah, that's going to be the word for today.
Word of the day.
Word of the day. The students that show a little more grit are just more present and get through the process a lot, well, frankly, better for them and better for us, right?
I agree. It does help us. Makes it a little easier for us to do our job in terms of guiding and supporting students going through the crisis.
So I want to know, and the question always is, and we talk about it, what makes, regardless of the circumstances, why are some people are just more resilient than others? And that's it.
Great question. And on that note, I'd like to introduce today's guest. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Charlotte Wasserman, who is a freshman at Southern Methodist University, SMU. Charlotte hails from Cleveland, and she's really passionate about empowering girls to become the best versions of themselves through her nonprofit called It's a Girl's Life. Charlotte's been working on It's a Girl's Life since its creation in middle school for her. She's hosted several events for teen girls, primarily focused on teaching them about grit and resilience. And her current focus is on growing and being the host of It's a Girl's Life podcast, which empowers young women to be creators of their own stories. Welcome, Charlotte.
Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on.
And I have to say that I've known Charlotte since she's been born. And if you want to talk about grit, someone that I respect a lot and is incredibly strong, beautiful, and resilient is Charlotte's mom, Hallie.
Aw.
So big fan. You can tell her I did a shout out about her today.
I will. I'll tell her after this.
So Charlotte, grit is a word, but it's an acronym when we looked at your website.
Yes.
G.R.I.T in all caps. Tell us what it stands for and what it really means.
Yeah. So grit is obviously as a one-word definition about like resilience and getting back up and out there after you like fall down or have a challenge and kind of overcoming that. But as a girl's life, we saw grit as more than that and kind of like a framework for people and like girls specifically to live by. So the G stands for growing guts, and that is growing courage and confidence, I guess you could say. And then the R stands for resilience, which is getting back out there after times are tough and you're experiencing different things. I is imperfections and accepting your own imperfections and that you're not perfect all around. People make mistakes and that's what makes us human. And then T is team. And that means surrounding yourself and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who build you up and support you and can help you through those tough times as well. So between all those, it's like the most important things that I think are for someone who wants to build grit, I guess you would say, and what you need or to like accept when you're building grit in your own life too.
That's a lot to unpack, actually.
That's a lot.
I love that. And I'm just trying to imagine as a middle school student, having the maturity and awareness and insight to think about creating this platform and executing it. So tell us a little more about what inspired you to do what you're doing and create grit.
The first thing I would say is that I can't take full responsibility for like the whole G.R.I.T framework because that was actually established at a foundation out in California that I found when I was in middle school that was teaching girls, but very like small group settings, middle school and maybe high schools as well, about grit and resilience. So what happened is that when I was in middle school, I was like facing a lot of academic and social challenges, as a lot of girls do. And I just realized that there has to be like some way to teach girls about everything that we're all experiencing that will like provide them clarity on like what they're experiencing, but also how to fix it. And when I heard about what this organization out in California was doing and teaching girls about, which was grit, I did my own research and found out it was a topic that was mostly taught to adults. And I thought it was so interesting in how you can actually teach that to girls and how meaningful it would be. So then I reached out to them and we just started talking about creating an event series for teen girls here in Cleveland. So it wasn't just going to specific middle schools or high schools, but anyone who wanted to come could attend, learn what grit is, hear about it in like real life examples from speakers. And again, remind them that like you're not the only person who's dealing with something, or that could be.
I have a 2-part question, if you'll bear with me a little bit.
Mhm.
I struggle with the idea, can you teach grit?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something you just have to live through something tough and look back? But if
Right.
your whole group is based on the idea that you can, so I'm assuming your answer is yes. But can you give me an example of a situation where someone learned some tools, what those tools were, and they actually got gritty?
That's so
Good
interesting. 'Cause I really
question.
like no one's ever asked me that question before. I think like the part that's teachable about grit is that the reflection part, what you said, is helping people realize that like it's something that you grow over time. And I think that it's like you have to almost focus on realizing that you have it based on like experiences you've dealt with in the past and how those experiences impact where you are now and how you deal with the different things happening to you right now. Or it could be like identifying the problem and realizing, what that taught you. And that's like a practice of grit because you're realizing like what is something that I once struggled with and how is that teaching me something about like what I can use today. So I think it's more like the teaching part is more of like the realizing or reflecting part. And then a real example of grit and I guess how you see it teaching someone something. I guess I've talked to a lot of people about it. So I'm trying to pick like my favorite one, but let me think for a second. I would say I can use like my own kind of like personal story as an example, but when I was going to college, which was a recent decision, obviously like last year, a year ago today, I was hearing back from a bunch of colleges. I remember this time specifically, I was hearing back from the college I'm at now. But one thing was like my college decisions were back to back 2 days in a row. One was a rejection from a school that I made an early decision to, and one was a school that I'm currently at right now. And those were a day apart from each other. And I chose, through all of the other places that I got accepted into later on, I was able to make the decision to go to the school I'm at right now. And that was a school that no one really from like my hometown talked about going to. And I was going from Ohio to a school in Texas. And a lot of people had a lot of specific things to say about where I was going off to that weren't always like, they like a lot of like questions like, oh, like, why would you go all the way over there? Or I don't have any family down there. So I was like, oh, this is so nerve wracking, like new experiences, new people, something totally outside of my comfort zone. But now that I'm there, I realized that like, even though this was maybe like a tougher decision or something that was a little bit different from just going to school in Ohio, maybe where a lot of people went to, I knew it taught me that like I could do something where I don't know anybody and like find people to be friends with, or that I could do something that's like outside of the known and be just fine. So that's like an example.
Well, you're more than just fine. You're actually
thinking about that.
thriving.
But it's interesting to hear you speak about just taking what you've just shared with us, the process of settling on your college, and you made a decision and people were questioning you and you were sort of doing something different from a lot of your peers surrounding you. And then you found new people. It makes me think of the T in grit, T.
Mhm.
So how do you know when to change up your team or what to look for in quote unquote teammates.
And teams change, right?
Right.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes we realize, I know I've had a lot of different life experiences, and I feel like I'm a cat who's lived 9 lives. And sometimes I look back and I think these were lovely people in my life, but they weren't my team. I'm a little bit of an odd duck, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've especially gone through experiences where there was a place and a time for a relationship that was supportive and meaningful. And then we evolve and you reevaluate. But Charlotte, I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts on changing up your team.
Yeah, I think it's really important, like, topics to talk about because when I was in high school and middle school, I really struggled with finding the right people to surround myself with.
It's hard.
And
Hard for everyone.
yeah,
At
I
any
guess it's like
age,
kind of a
yeah,
constant
truly.
thing. But I just remember that was a specific time. I realized I was hanging out with people who weren't really like supportive, I guess, of the direction I was heading in. So then I had to decide that I wanted to find people who were going to be more supportive of that. And that was really scary because then I was like, oh, well, I didn't really know who to lean on to when I was like going through a
Right.
transition of people. But then I realized that, when you do find people who are not only like supportive of what you're working on, but supportive of like your goals and maybe you have some things in common, I think that it is really important because it provides some confidence around things that maybe you find that are important to you, but also provides like people who you can reach back onto when like things are getting really challenging and you might need support that you don't feel like you can provide only by yourself. But I've realized that even if, and even so, like when I went off to college, I knew that it was going to be a really exciting experience for me to find even more people that I connected with because when I was in high school and initially was trying to find different groups of people that support me, I always felt like really limited because I had a really small high school class. And then when I went to college, I knew like I would have so many different people that were around me. So I could really go and look for the kind of people that I wanted to surround myself with. And then it just helped me feel like more confident in myself, but also like confident in things I wanted to work on too, which is really important that I found.
And your team's going to grow again after college.
It always
And
changes.
it always changes.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's really nice to hear you talk about taking some risk, the G, and then having confidence and finding your team, people to build you up and support you. Tell us about, I want to, this idea of grit, and your organization is focused on young women. Is teaching grit different for boys and girls, or is it the same?
I honestly don't exactly know what it's like to teach grit to boys because I've never had that experience before. I do have
But you
older
do have
brothers.
2 brothers.
Well, I do. I was just going to talk about that. However, I don't really talk to them about these Well, I mean, I guess like if I ever had an event or was working on something that's a girl's life, obviously they knew about it, but I never like saw the impact of what that could be because I never focused on a group of boys before.
And
Fair.
fair. No, that's fair. And you went to an all-girls school.
Yeah,
right?
so I
Growing
never
up.
had much experiences like until, and I still haven't because even at college, it's not like I don't really, there's obviously it's like a co-ed school, but I haven't done like an event with boys ever. So I don't really know the difference. I would just say I've always focused on girls because I am a girl. And that was an experience I knew is some things that girls do are unique to girls. So that's
Of
why I
course.
kind of chose to focus in that area.
Well, and it's work you enjoy doing. So that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm going to ask a tough question.
Okay.
Life is not fair.
Not?
And
I thought it was. for
Yeah,
everyone.
well, yeah.
Equitable at all times.
Equitable at all times. And how do you impart grit when some people's problems are just different in scale with what other people have to deal with? I mean, certainly people dealing with broken homes or disease or illness is different than people dealing with my boyfriend just broke up with me.
Right.
Or what we sometimes refer to as mean girl behavior.
Or mean girl behavior.
Yeah.
We deal with a lot of parents calling us saying my child's bullied. And I have to break it to them that bullying is a technical word and you can't make people invite your child to the birthday party. That is not a reason to call a lawyer. It's sad. It's painful, but it's
Mhm.
not necessarily now total exclusion can be bullying, right? It
Mhm.
depends to degrees. But what we're seeing is we've seen some really, really, really bad bullying cases where kids have been assaulted and
Yeah.
psychologically devastated. But that is just a difference from someone not liking you. And
Well, and I think parents sometimes have they recoil a little when they hear us say,
we're always given bad news and unpopular news.
well, and we're not minimizing the impact of the quote unquote mean girl behavior, but it's just the reality is that not all obstacles or difficulties are of similar magnitude or import on an individual's life. And
So I don't know. Have you had experience with someone coming to you crying, saying, God forbid, I have, my mom's got, God forbid, cancer, or my father, or I don't have enough money. And it just seems like you can't compare problems. But I just wanted
Yeah.
to know what your reflection is on scalability of issues in life.
Right. I think it's definitely interesting because I've always thought about how like it's amazing that like grit can be applied to like such different problems, and yet it could still teach people about what to do when they're experiencing those things. So I always thought that's great that there's like a need for it, because you can teach it to people who are going through like very, very different situations, such as you talk about, that are maybe life threatening. But you can also teach it to people who are dealing with problems that are like, the mean girl thing sort of situation. So I always thought that was very interesting how like one topic could be taught to like people who are experiencing very different things. But I remember like a speaker we had at one of our events, we would always have an example person who would share their story. And one year it was a speaker who was talking about how she lost her mom when she was really young, and how it impacted her in a way that made her start something where she could have people share their own stories, not only as like a way to heal, but also to bring attention to what different things people are dealing with, and how to talk about hard feelings that are difficult in life, because those are really difficult situations. And so it's called Never Ever Give Up. And it was like a letter writing project where people could submit their own stories about what they were dealing with. And she shared those stories. And then we had all of the attendees write their own stories. And so it was really interesting because you're right. People have different types of problems, and some of them are more urgent than others, I would say. But I've also found that doesn't mean that, and I don't think you're saying this, can validate like different people's problems, because they're both problems. It's just different about what their problems kind of entail and how big that's going to impact them. But grit can be taught to both situations.
That was really
well said.
well said. That you have a tool that works for any type of problem. Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So, Charlotte, you have your own podcast called It's a Girl's Life. What type of topics do you cover? Who are your guests?
You plug your podcast, Charlotte.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's called It's a Girl's Life. And it's a lot of empowering and inspirational interviews for young women. So we've talked to a lot of not only like female entrepreneurs, because those stories always have a lot of grit, I found in the beginning of their stories and throughout, but also I've talked to like young women who are like teenagers some of them have been entrepreneurs, some of them have not been. And then also like what I started to get more interested in was different things that young women could be dealing with, and inviting on guests to unpack those situations and help them, provide them advice and what to do when you're dealing with those situations. So I had an interview yesterday that was really fun that I really liked. And she was actually a food nutritionist. And we talked a lot about how to deal not only with moving away to college and not having like your everything that like you would have in your home, like kitchen and everything, but also like the mindset of food, and that can get really toxic for girls. So it's just like a really
How to be
interesting
healthy.
topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And something that I think everyone has kind of dealt with. So I thought that was really interesting to hear her opinion about it. But it's just kind of like empowering and educating girls about not only grit, but also different specific topics that can help them when they're growing up.
I want to shift focus a little bit. We talk about using grit to develop our own resilience and then getting a team. but I want to get your insight on what it takes to be a supportive team member, a supportive mentor, or a supportive friend. And I'm going to share a story about your own mother.
Ooh, tell us about
That's a good
Hallie.
Yeah, I've got a great grit giving gift from your mom. So I was going through a really, really, really dark period. And I mean, dark. It was bad. And I was on the phone with Hallie and I was driving to court that day. And I just was telling her how low I felt and how dark it felt for me. And I just felt like it was never going to end. I'm like getting teary talking about this. And Hallie paused and said, "Don't you want to know how your story ends? I'm really curious. I know this is going to be an awesome story."
That's a great question.
Oh my gosh, it was like the best. And all of a
That's
sudden
so
I'm like,
smart. Yeah.
yeah, it was so smart because it made me think, A, she believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me believe in me because I was like, yeah, I can do this. So I think we all need someone in our life. But can you give a couple tips out there for women, mothers, students on what it takes to be a good team member?
Yeah. I think that's something I've definitely been working on, like developing over the past few years because I realized like I wanted to find my own type group of people, but that also comes with you are becoming part of someone else's group of people as well. And especially with college, that's been so fun to realize that like I'll like make friends and then not only will I go to them for advice, but I see them coming to advice to me, which is really fun and like interesting to see. But I think some really good things to focus on is like that I'm also always working on is listening. You have to be like a good listener.
So
Um,
important.
hear what they're dealing with and not always just come like super quick to respond because sometimes like people just need to kind of like talk about what's happening and get it off their chest. And then I think that you need to, I feel like it's really important to like maybe share sometimes something you're dealing with that could maybe be on like a similar level sometimes because that can help them see like, oh, if she got through this, maybe a similar situation, or it could be something different if you haven't gone through the same things, which won't always happen. Maybe that could help them kind of see like there is an end to like what I might be dealing with. But then also like sometimes you just don't know what to say, which is also really hard. And so that's when you just like should be honest with them and be like, I've never had to deal with this myself. I don't even know. This is like a hard thing for me to grasp too. And I think honesty is always, everyone can understand honesty. And it's good to be honest with the people who you care about because it like shows that like you would not even go for like telling them the wrong thing. You just want to tell them like, I'm here for you. And like, you come and talk to me about this and like make sure that they know like you're here to support them as well. Yes.
I think that's a great curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should really write that down, what you said, and I'm picking up what you're throwing down. It's great.
Charlotte, based on your experiences and then your guests and your podcast and the work you're doing with your organization, what is the biggest challenge impacting young women today, in your opinion?
I think one of the biggest challenges is like overall confidence for girls. I think we see that a lot, which is why sometimes girls are really hesitant to not only like start their own thing, but they think that like they just can't do it and they can't get through it. And I think that
I think that's true for all ages.
Oh my God.
yeah.
Out of the
I
mouth.
think it's like a
Yeah, you're spot on. Yep.
problem that like I mean everybody of course has, but I just see it a lot in like girls. They just think there's no and I also think like another thing is they don't think they're like worth being able to get better too, which I think is like really sad because like everyone's worth can improve themselves, and then they just don't do anything and they like won't like try to improve their situations. I think that's definitely a big problem.
What are your dreams for this organization? Is this something that you want to continue with, or after you graduate from college, do you think you're going to pass the baton?
I think like I've been like constantly asking myself that as well. Once I went to college, I knew like I wanted to give myself the time to evolve myself and like figure everything out there. But now that I've settled more into the college experience, I found that like it's definitely impacting girls, and girls who are younger than me too has always been a part of me. So I don't ever really see that ever going away, because just certain moments in my own experiences where I've seen like the impact we've done has been really inspirational. But I think probably the way that we do what we do will continue to change over time. And maybe our mission will change slightly too. But I'm not really sure. And I think that there's definitely still a need for this content to be taught. I just don't know exactly what it will turn into.
Who's we? Who do you work with?
Oh, well, I work with the organization still in California. They just kind of like the person that I worked with there, Sarah Anderson, she left the organization and started her own coaching business for girls. But we worked together on the events for the past 4 years, and I would work with her on it. But I also think and then we also did some podcast episodes together too. But I think something that I always wanted to do was grow the kind of like It's a Girl's Life team and involve some other girls that are around my age to work with them on it, because I've always kind of done a lot of the work by myself. And I think it's fun to involve other people and help them like make an impact on girls too. So I would love to work on it with someone else as well, but I have to find that person.
What do you see as next for the organization?
Well, I really want to, since I go to school in Dallas, Texas, and it's a really close-knit community I've found so far, especially with the university that I go to, I really would love to do an event with Dallas girls in the schools in the area, because there's a lot of schools that are right near my college. And then maybe something with college girls. I just don't know what that could be.
Kristina and I work with a lot of Greek organizations. And
Yeah, that could be cool too.
that could be really cool. Question. Do
Mhm.
you think sororities are good for building the resilience for girls? Or do you think the whole rush process where girls go and select on criteria that's not always based on depth? Do you think
Right.
Substance? Thank you. I
Yeah.
was groping for the word Supler. I mean, do you think sororities take away from resilience, build resilience, are good, bad, or neutral?
Interesting question.
I had to ask.
I'm
very
very curious to
interesting.
hear what your thoughts are, Charlotte.
This
Yeah.
is real talk. This is real talk
Mhm.
with Susan and Kristina.
Keeping
So
it real.
you gotta get real with you.
Right. I think it's interesting because I'm actually going to go through that process in January myself, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, you'll have to report back.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna have you back to talk about sororities foster
Oh.
resilience.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because like there's so much I've been hearing about it for the past few months, but also like so much is still like unknown about the experience because I haven't done it yet. But I think it depends on the individual and like what they want out of the process, because obviously there's some cases where people are going to join a sorority for maybe like the quote unquote wrong reasons. Sometimes it depends what they want out of it. And like for me personally, like I really want to find like a group of people who have similar like values as me, I guess. Like they want to make an impact with the people that they like surround themselves with, but also like want to find a group of people that are like supportive. So like knowing that, I think is probably setting me apart from other people, or just maybe doing it to like for social stuff, which is obviously another reason why I want to join a sorority, but not the only reason. And it also depends. I don't know. They kept talking to us about, we would have these PNM, like potential new member meetings before Rush actually started. And they would tell us about like how they viewed it as like a values-based system. So how you should be finding the houses that align with similar values as you. Probably not a lot of people think about it as much as I have, but like I always thought about like how that means, oh, I should be clear then on what I want and why I want it. And hopefully that will work out in the end too. So
We have to have you come back.
that's just an
Charlotte,
interesting thought.
You are such an impressive young woman.
Oh
It's
my
been
gosh.
Such a treat speaking with you today. I really encourage our listeners to check out It's a Girl's Life and check out the podcast, the organization, everything you have to offer. This has really been a lot of fun.
And I hope this organization goes viral on every campus. There should be, and it's a girls' life organization everywhere and in every high school and much success. I know I am beaming with pride.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you so
us.
much.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Susan and Kristina. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. And leave us a review so other people can find the content we share here. You can follow us on Instagram. Just search our handle @StoneSupler. And for more resources, visit us online at studentdefense.kjk.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our Real Talk community. We'll see you next time.